Okay, good morning, everyone. Let's get started. Other folks might be joining as we go along here, but in the interest of time, I think we'll get started. There's a question from the audience right now about folks being muted. That is true, everyone's muted. If you have a question or you want to, pose something that we answer, you can use the Q&A button that you can access. If you scroll your mouse to the bottom of the screen, you should see a Q&A button, and you can go ahead and drop in a question there. So today, we're here to talk about SMS and some of the tips and tricks for getting your messages delivered. So whether you've been using SMS for your business for many years or you're just getting started, you might have realized that there's more that goes on behind the scenes than meets the eye. And if that's the case, you're certainly not alone. We have, by popular demand, put this webinar together to address some of the common traps that people fall into and to help you educate yourselves on some ways to optimize your delivery. So what we're going to cover today is just a snapshot of what's really happening behind the scenes of an SMS exchange, common pitfalls with number types, some of the myths you may have heard, and then we'll wrap up with a Q&A, but I do want everyone to feel comfortable asking questions as we go along. So again, there's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen in Zoom. And you can feel free to ask a question there, and we'll do our best to answer questions as they come in. If that's not working, you can send a chat. So we'll try to answer all the questions as quickly as possible. With that, let me introduce who we have on the call today. I'm Hillary. I'll be moderating. And I have two experts with me. I have Joe Lever and Ramya Raghu, both solutions architects at Plivo, and they're going to talk you through some of the content here. On that note, Joe, do you want to kick us off here?
Absolutely. Thank you, Hillary. So to start with, it makes sense to talk about how your messages actually get out to the end users, the route that they take. When you send a message to an API platform like Plivo, where do your messages actually go and how do they end up on the handsets of your end users? There's actually several different hops that these messages go through. So the first step is obviously you send your message to Plivo. Plivo then forwards your message on to a carrier. Now, what's a carrier? A carrier is a nationwide network that ties all the different cell phone operators, all those different cell phone network operators together. So when you have somebody's phone number, you send the message to that phone number, the carrier knows which network operator that phone number belongs to and is able to route the message to the correct network operator. It's forwarded onto the network operator, and eventually the end user gets the message. So when we're starting to troubleshoot the SMS delivery process, it's typically when there's an issue, it happens at either the carrier or the network operator level. Now, why is that true? That's true because both the network operator and the carrier have what are called message filters. They're message content filters. The purpose of these message content filters is to make sure that their end users have a good experience. So when a message doesn't reach an end user, 99.9% of the time in the United States and Canada, it means that message content or something else about that message tripped a flag at the carrier or the network operator level, and that message was prevented by the carrier or the network operator from reaching the end user. So a lot of what we'll dig into today are reasons why that happens and how to prevent that. A platform like Plivo can help you maximize your deliverability by a couple things. First of all, we keep direct connections to our carriers, and we work with our carriers on a day-to-day basis to maximize deliverability for our clients. The number one way that we can help, though, is by keeping you in compliance with regulations in whatever country that you're sending in, and by maintaining a redundant network to multiple carriers. The network operators also change and update their rules, and as some of you, I'm sure, may know, this regulation is changing. The regulations in this industry are changing quickly. So we keep abreast of all of this, and we make sure that you know what we know, but we also have the ability to reach out directly to our carriers to get more insight into why a message might have been undelivered. A lot of the best practices that we'll cover today are gleaned from those relationships.
All right, thanks, Joe, for the intro on that landscape. Maybe that was a refresher for some of you, but maybe it was illuminating for others. What we're going to cover now are some of the common pitfalls that happen and how you can avoid them. So starting with mismatched content and number type. Then talking about some of the local carrier rules. And then really digging in a little bit further into content that might look like spam, dreaded spam. So Ramya, could you talk to us about the content types?
Yeah, absolutely. So before we look at the common pitfalls, let's talk about the 3 kinds of SMS content that are there in the market. The first one is a person-to-person or a P2P traffic. This kind of traffic categorizes messages like a conversational SMS or a two-way SMS that involves an outbound message and receiving a reply and continuing the conversation. An example for this would be like number masking. Like if a customer wanted to get in touch with their cab driver or their food delivery agent, you can text them and you receive replies. These kind of messages fall under the person-to-person SMS content. Next, we have the application-to-person or the A2P traffic. Messages like transactional messages like OTP, verification code, notifications or alerts and appointment reminders fall under this category. And the last we have here is the promotional content. If you were sending out customer loyalty messages like a discount that's available or a coupon code to your end users, and marketing messages would fall under this category. And then we have the different number types that are available in the market. The first one is local long codes. Long codes are your 10-digit local numbers. These are meant for P2P messages, which are your conversational number masking two-way SMSs. Long codes can be used to send message and it can receive replies too. Long codes can also receive voice calls. Then we have toll-free numbers. Toll-free numbers are your typical 1-800 numbers. Now we have newer prefixes like the 844, 855, 833 are also toll-free. Toll-free can be used for P2P and A2P messages. These are your transactional messages and two-way communication. Like you could send an appointment reminder message using a toll-free number. For a toll-free, to use a toll-free number, you must have an opt-in. An opt-in is where the end user subscribes or opts in to receiving these notifications from your system. Toll-free numbers can also receive voice calls. Next, we have short codes. Short codes are your 5 or 6-digit short numbers. Short code is the only pre-approved number type that is approved to send marketing messages. Short codes can be used to send out campaigns and promotional content, which is typically one-to-many communication and also falls under the A2P category. Short code must require opt-in. Without an opt-in in place, you will not get approved for short code. Short code supports just outbound and inbound messages. They cannot receive voice calls. The last kind of number that we have is an alphanumeric sender ID. Now, this is applicable to international countries outside of the US and Canada. These are your sender IDs that can be characters and a and numbers. So when the destination number receives the message, instead of seeing a number as the sender ID, they would see your brand name or your company name, or a notify or a verify as the sender ID. Sender IDs can only send one-way messaging, which is outbound messaging. They cannot receive replies, and they cannot receive voice calls either.
Thanks, Ramya. Before we move to the next slide, there are a couple of questions here. First question is, do you see a problem sending A to P type notifications to a long code number?
That's a great question. And to be completely transparent, long code numbers, local long code numbers are not carrier approved for A to P type notifications. And the different number types go through different content filters. Messages that look to long codes, messages sent through long codes go through content filters. And if they look like A to P notifications, patterns of sending, like sending links or sending many messages out from the same number in a short period of time, those types of sending patterns look like ATP traffic, and they will cause your long code numbers to get blocked, either by the network operator or at the carrier level.
Thanks, Joe. One more question. Does using 800 number for P2P always require opt-in?
Yes, so toll-free is, as a responsible organization, for toll-free, we as a responsible organization we have to vet and make sure that the customer's use case is valid, which includes the opt-in step. We also verify your message content before you get approved to use a toll-free number for SMSing.
Great, thank you. Okay. Great questions from the audience, thank you. Let's move on. Let's look at some examples, actually. Joe, how about you take us through this example? It's relevant to the question that just came up.
Absolutely. So we took these examples and we built them from patterns of behavior that we've seen from existing clients. This one is really a pretty typical story in API-driven messaging. So let's say that you're a lobbying group and you had a particular agenda that you wanted to promote. So you wanted to notify supporters in your local zip code that they need to get out and they need to vote for your 4-day work week. So today the US Senate is discussing a new bill that would make Fridays work-free. Reply with your zip code to ask your senators for support. Well, I support this idea, I do. But what will happen is the carriers won't. If you notice, this message is coming from a local long code. Now, if you tried to use a local long code to send this type of message to everybody in a certain area, it would look like A to P traffic. It might even look like promotional traffic. So this kind of message, what you would see is a few messages in, your number would be blocked and future messages wouldn't go out. So then you'd call us and we would tell you, oh my goodness, no, what you need is an A to P approved number, perhaps even a promotional approved number for a call to action like this. It would also be really, really important to make sure that you were sending this to an opted in group of people so that you didn't generate customer complaints.
Great.
Well, next, what we have here is an example of a message that was sent using a shortcode. Before we look at this message, let me cover a little bit about what CTIA is and what shaft laws are. CTIA is the Cellular Telecommunications Association that sets down the rules and regulations for messages and any telecommunications in the industry. And then shaft laws. Shaft laws stands for sex, hate, alcohol, firearms, and tobacco. Now, according to the CTIA, it is prohibited to send any message that promotes Shaft. Now, if you look at this example here, I have a local wine and spirit store, and I have a new collection of Merlot. Looks like I have a short code that's been approved. I'm assuming would be for a customer loyalty or a promotional use case. And now that I have a new collection of Merlot, I wanted to let my customers know that my collection is here, and if they come in and check it out, they get a bottle of their choice for free. Now, the problem with this message is that the content contains alcohol-related words like Merlot, for example. And there's no way I, as a wine and spirit store owner, can control who views this message. Sometimes there are chances that a kid might read this message and thinks drinking wine is cool. So CTI, to protect the customers and end users from these kind of messages being read by unwanted people or unintended people, you want to make sure that you don't put any of these shaft content in the messages. Your message might not get blocked the first attempt, but when there is an audit, like the carriers can audit it, the network operators can audit it, or sometimes even the end users might raise complaints, your shortcode will get discontinued and it will get blocked.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah, actually, can we go back for just a second? I want to pick that up a little bit. On the Shaft regulations, that doesn't mean that as a wine merchant, a short code that is approved for the kind of promotional content you want to send out is the wrong tool for you. It just means you need to be sure to be aware of your content and make sure that it does not contain any keywords related to sex, hate, alcohol, tobacco, or firearms. So a more generic loyalty type message like new products in stock, stop by one case and get an extra bonus for free would be totally fine. That contains no Shaft related content. But this particular message that mentions Merlot by name, that would be the problem there.
Okay, great clarification. Thank you. Ramya, can you describe this situation as well?
Yep, absolutely. This is a sample of a message that was sent using a toll-free number. As you can see, the message reads, looking for a new apartment? Relocation Rentals has hot new deals on just posted new rentals in your area. Now, this messages clearly looks like an unsolicited promotional content, like the sentence that says looking for a new apartment. Carriers tend to look out for messages that look like unsolicited or not opted in messages, like in the real estate area, or pre-approved loans or payday loans or any of these marketing messages. And also, if you look at the message sample here, you can see the last sentence that says click here to view the latest and greatest and hurry. So these are some kind of phrases and words that can tip off the message content filters that will eventually lead to your messages getting blocked or your numbers getting blocked. So again, to send these messages, I would recommend using like a pre-approved A to P kind of messaging if you wanted to send out bulk campaigns and new apartments, kind of messages. Short code might be a good example, good number type to send these messages.
I really like this example because on the surface of it, it looks like you've done everything right. You've got the opt-in, you've got the A to P approved message, and then you still run into a blocking issue because of an automated content filter. Your customers in this particular case would have signed up and requested these alerts and notifications. It's a totally legitimate alert and notification use case for an A to P product like a toll-free number, but it's important to make sure your content will pass the message filters, and that means it needs to look like an alert or reminder. We actually publish a really, really good best practices guide with some tips and tricks on how to craft these messages with a few really easy things you can do to avoid these content filters. I have one question from the audience. It's a really good question, so I want to just take a break while we're talking about this. It's an example. It's a real-life example. It says, a long code, an opted-in customer specifically requests schedule info, and it's occasionally getting blocked. it's just a single one-off customer-initiated transactional message, short codes aren't economically feasible for this particular use case. This is a perfect application of a toll-free number. A toll-free number is extremely cost competitive with both long code and short code. And for this type of non-promotional, alert, and transaction-oriented message, it may be something that would work out perfectly for your use case.
Thanks, Joe. Okay, let's move on. Joe, let's touch on some of the international regulations. Now, I know we can't touch on regulations in every country around the world, but we've just included a couple here that come up frequently. Countries where a lot of our customers have use cases. So why don't you walk us through these couple of use cases?
Absolutely. Well, the good news there is that the content filtering is mostly a United States and Canada situation. In the rest of the world, to stay in compliance with the local regulations, an API platform like Plivo will usually have you covered in the automated backend. Things like the types of numbers that you're sending from, the message velocity, the time of day that you can send. Those are automatically taken care of by the platform. But there's still a few little gotchas that in specific markets that are worth talking about. For example, we get a lot of questions about China. Yes, you can absolutely message into China, but it can't just come from a random number or an alphanumeric code like other international destinations. In China, what you want to do is pre-register with the carrier association there what's called a virtual long number. That's a 16-digit code that will identify you to the carrier. Typically, we would do that for you. We just take care of it on the back end. If you do send the odd message into China and you don't have one of these, your messages should still go through, but they'll come from a random number every time. So for a consistent, predictable user experience, you really want to have a pre-registered virtual long number in China. Other countries like Indonesia, India, and Thailand, you can't dynamically set your alphanumeric sender ID. You need to pre-register it with the carrier in advance. In these cases, your message sends might actually fail unless you have one of these sender IDs pre-registered. Again, we do that for you. It's just important to know there are some nuances to this. Obviously, you don't need to be an expert in every single country's regulations. The simplest thing to do is just call us, let us know what countries that you're going to be sending into, and let us let you know, what legwork we'll have to do on your behalf to get you set up.
Great, thank you. All right, so we've provided some examples of content, number types, and some of the problems you might encounter. Let's talk about some of the myths, some of the things that you might have heard that may or may not be true. So Ramya, can you talk to us about double opt-in?
Yeah, it is a myth out there that carriers require double opt-in. Now, what is a double opt-in? Opt-in is a process where you get the end customer's consent to send them messages. That's the first step of any opt-in. A double opt-in is where once you receive the consent, you send them a message confirming their consent. So if you look at the example here, there is a consent that is in place. That's why you sent them a message. And then you ask the end user to reply yes to confirm. So this is definitely not a mandatory requirement by all the carriers or network operators for all number types, especially for short codes. Short codes go through a tedious approval and then a process by carriers and network operators where they do look for a valid opt-in, which can be like a keyword opt-in. Keyword opt-in is where the end users would text in to a short code with a keyword like join or start, for example. And then you have the web opt-in. Web opt-in is where the users would log on to a website, open up a registration form, put in their phone number, check a box that says, I agree to receive messages, and opt in to the service that is being offered. The last kind of opt-in that we have is a paper opt-in. Paper opt-in is where if you went to a retail store or a kiosk and you fill out a form, give your number, consent, and then agree to receive messages from them. These are valid kinds of opt-in that do not require a double opt-in. If you wanted to have double opt-in for your use case, that's great. You can have like a double block gate to make sure you do not send messages to any of your unsubscribed customers, but just so you know, it's not mandatory.
Okay, Ramya, so the takeaway here is in most cases, you need to get opt-in, but you don't have to get double opt-in. That's not a carrier requirement.
That's not a carrier requirement. That's exactly right. Now, you still may decide to do it, and here's why. Especially on a short code where it's a whitelisted, pre-approved product, and you've invested some time and energy into making sure that you got the short code in the first place. What you want to first and foremost, what you want to avoid is customer complaints about receiving unwanted content from that short code. So depending on the kind of content that you're sending and the frequency with which you send it, it may be helpful to get a double opt-in just to remind the customer that this is something that they asked for, that they signed up for.
Great, got it.
And we also have a question from the audience at this point. I think it makes sense to answer. It's actually two questions. Do we get positive indication of blocks or other failed deliveries? Yes. In fact, Plivo does several things for you in regards to blocking and opt-out requests, which we won't get into on this call, but I can definitely give you more information on afterwards. And do we get any positive evidence that the user actually received the message? Another great question, and it depends on your number type.
Yep. So long codes in the US market and Canada, long codes do not support handset delivery reports. You get the network level acceptance report, whereas toll-free and short code number types provide you handset delivery reports. So if you see the message status as delivered while using toll-free or short code, it means that the handset received the message.
Great. So let's dig into the second myth here. I have to buy a short code to send promotional content. This is actually a semi-myth. Short codes are the only carrier-approved product for sending promotional content. And if you're going to be sending promotional content on any scale at all, it probably makes sense for you to procure a short code. But it might not always make business sense for your particular use case to get a short code. As an example, let's say that you're a local grocer and you have a loyalty program for your customers, and basically what you want to do is just send them the weekly coupon mailer. That's technically promotional content, but the business case might not make sense for you. So what can you do? Providers like Plivo will typically offer a long code number management tool. What this does is it lets you purchase long code numbers in bulk and use them in a CTIA approved way to get your promotional content out. Obviously, that's only going to work well with opted-in users that don't generate carrier complaints, but it is a way to bypass the necessity of procuring a short code in certain use cases. If you're unsure about the business case, it's easy to call us and we'll walk through the numbers with you and find out what's right for you.
Okay, interesting. So it's not quite as straightforward as it might seem.
So can I send A to P messages via long codes then?
Similarly, promotional or A to P messages via long codes. But remember that any message that you send via a long code route will go through a long code content filter, so your mileage may vary. For best results, it's always best to match your particular use case with the approved number type.
Okay, good to know. All right, last myth here, Joe. Does everyone here who wants to send SMS messages, do we all have to be experts in all these rules and regulations?
That's a great question, and the answer is no. The short version of that is that there's a lot to this, but we've become experts so that you don't have to be. Typically, the way that we engage with our customers is to learn about what they're trying to do, and then recommend one or more solutions that will provide maximum success at the best economic cost.
Okay, good to know. All right, folks, that concludes our discussion. So just to summarize what we've talked about, number one, choosing the right provider is important only because you need to have someone who can help you understand your particular use case and navigate the complexity of these regulations to figure out what's the right situation for you. That said, it's good to educate yourself on some of the basics, some of the things we've talked about here, and that can help you avoid frustration if you've got some of those basics, understand some of those basics. Key thing we talked about here is match your content and your business need to the right SMS number type. As Joe just mentioned, that's the first step in setting yourself up for success. As Rami mentioned early on, there aren't a lot of public resources that you can reference. There is one, and we'll send this deck out so you'll have this link, but the CTIA does have one document with some general info on it. We've also got some developer information on our website, which we'd be happy to point you to. All right, let's leave some time for questions. Thank you for posting your questions during the session. I wanted to open it to everyone else to, ask any questions that you would like to ask.
I see there's quite a few questions already.
Great, yes.
Let me just start at the top and see if we can address some of these. Do carriers and network operators approve of sending A to P messages on long codes over a lot of different long codes? That's a great question. There are strict rules from the CTIA about exactly how messages can be sent out. If you use a tool like Plivo's Power Pack, it will keep you in compliance with the letter of the regulations. If it's necessary for your business case to do that, it's a great thing to use. If not, it might be better to use an A to P approved number type in almost all cases. Second question, I was told if the number of customers on a long code approaches 200, I should add additional numbers. If I use toll-free, is there any such guideline?
200, the number that you see there is just a best practice. It is not a hard and fast number. Because long codes are meant for P2P messages, we recommend that our customers don't send over 150 or 200 messages per number per day. When it comes to toll-free, you don't have such limit because toll-free is an approved number type to send out A to P messages. There is no limit on how many messages you can send per number per day.
Yeah, similarly on A to P approved numbers, the number of messages you can get out per second is typically a lot higher. So it's definitely the best to use that kind of number type for that kind of content. But to answer your question directly, no, you don't need to worry about that on toll-free.
All right, next we have, are there any plans to round-robin SMS messages spread among numbers? I think this is exactly what Joe was talking about. There are providers that have a tool out there. We offer a tool called Power Pack, which is meant for long codes right now, but we will introduce short codes in that Power Pack. Right now, this Power Pack tool is the number pooling tool. The platform automatically decides the best number to send a message using that Power Pack.
And there's more to it than just simple round robining. There's also velocity restrictions, matching, geo-matching, the geolocation of the source and destination number. There's a lot to it to make sure that it works well, but that is available. A couple people have asked about recordings of the presentation. Yes, they will be sent out to all participants afterwards.
We'll also send out a link to the best practices guide that we mentioned here.
Great. I do have one question about the carrier's plans to implement A to P routes on 10-digit long code. So I see we have some advanced users. So a lot of discussion here about long code routes versus A to P approved routes. The carriers, or the network operators themselves, would like to get in on some of the action of A to P messaging on their own local long codes. So there's been a lot of rumor and announcement in the industry about the availability of 10-digit long code A to P approved routes. Now, Verizon, as a network operator, is going to be going first to market with this. They've announced a couple of times already. The latest announcement was that it was going to be going live May 15th. And we were ready to go with them, but that got moved back. So there's not a new date yet, but as soon as that becomes available in the market, it'll be available through us.
So does that mean I can send A to P messages via long codes only to Verizon numbers?
Yes. Yes. So in that case, you'll definitely want to use a number management tool like PowerPack to assist you with that. Okay, this is a great question, Ramya. What is the process to get an A to P application approved?
So there are two kinds of number types that support A to P, that is toll-free and short code. If you think your use case requires a toll-free or a short code as your number type, feel free to get in touch with us and we can walk you through the process. Toll-free approval typically takes a day or two to get approved, whereas a short code goes through each and every carrier and network operator in the country, that is like over 50 operators. So the whole process typically takes anywhere between 4 to 6 weeks to get approved and go live with all the operators in the country. But we will help you with that. We will walk you through the process. So feel free to get in touch with us if you think you need short code or a toll-free number.
Yeah, short code typically requires some additional preparation and groundwork. If you're using, for example, a web opt-in form to get opt-in for your short code, there's specific terminology that needs to be on the page with your terms and conditions. So if you let us help you get all the preparation done first, it can really shortcut the amount of time it takes to get your short code approved.
And yes, so to clarify, we do facilitate the application process for customers when it comes to short codes. All right, next we have, is 15-digit virtual number the only way a user in China to keep receiving messages from the same source or same number? If yes, will Plivo help me register a 15-digit virtual number? Yes, absolutely. It's a 16-digit virtual number. We will help register one number for you. And that is the only way the recipient will constantly receive numbers from the same number. Like Joe mentioned in the earlier slides, you can send messages to China, but without this VLN, the receivers will see a different number every time.
Right. And one thing to note about that is that there is a variable amount of lead time on getting those 16-digit long code numbers from the Chinese Association. So if you think that you have a business case coming up where you'd want to procure one of those, it's best to start early. I think that was all the questions. Please raise your hand or type your question again if we didn't get to you, or if you have a follow-up question. Otherwise, I think we worked our way through them. These are great questions, by the way. Thank you so much.
Thanks everyone for your participation. Again, we'll send out a follow-up email with a recording and link to some of the things that we discussed here in this meeting. Just to conclude here, you're welcome to schedule a one-on-one consultation with one of our experts. You can do that in 2 ways. You can go to plivo.com/webinar-SMS and fill out a request, or you can simply email us at solutions@plivo.com. And most likely you'll get a one-on-one consultation with Joe or Ramya. So with that, we'll conclude our webinar. Thank you so much for your participation. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.